indivisible, with
liberty
and justice.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Our first item is business from the public. This is for people who would like to speak not on something on today's agenda. So if you are a member of the public and have a comment for us regarding an issue that we will not be discussing pursuant to our agenda, now would be the time to make that statement. Geeta, do we have any business from the public?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We have received a number of emails from individuals pertaining to the item that is currently on the agenda. All the emails that we have received pertain to the agenda items. Are you comfortable if I proceed with that at this time?
No, we're going to have other commentary first, and then we will proceed to the comments from the public following our conversation regarding the issues at hand.
Okay.
Because there does seem to be some confusion over what we are discussing today. So thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Steve Elrod to provide some context for how this meeting was called and this conversation. Thanks, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. We are here. This is a properly noticed and called special meeting of the City Council, as the Mayor indicated. The agenda item for which we are here is to consider the extension of an emergency order. There was a declaration of emergency order, a declaration of emergency that was entered by Mayor Rodering today. That declaration was entered pursuant to section 92.105 of the city's municipal code, as well as the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act. That emergency declaration simply states that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a state of emergency in the city of Highland Park. It does not do anything more. It simply gives the mayor the authority to issue orders pursuant to that declaration. This is not a new thing in Highland Park. The mayor has twice before issued an emergency declaration during the pandemic since March of 2020. Both of the earlier declarations of emergency have expired. The mayor has now issued a new one. In this emergency declaration, the mayor provides, as she has done before, a period of 7 days. The corporate authorities, the city council, has the authority to extend the time period for that emergency declaration, and that is the item that's on your agenda. So as this will play out, I think, Mayor, you'll want to read your emergency declaration. The council will then discuss the proposed emergency order that the mayor would like to issue pursuant to that emergency declaration, and then the council will determine the appropriate time period to extend the declaration. As proposed, the agenda item is to extend it to the city council's second meeting in January, which is January 24th, at which time it'll appear on the agenda for the council to consider a further extension. Any questions about the procedure?
Okay, hearing none, I'll proceed with reading the declaration of emergency, and I want to restate what Steve stated, and that is, while I am providing this declaration of emergency, it's my request that we then proceed with extending this declaration of emergency. This is a temporary declaration of emergency. This is not a permanent change. Councilmember Littlewer.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm sorry, I was going to wait until we were voting on the next thing, but I just wanted to clarify. Any other vaccination or anything else we put in place will run concurrently in terms of extension of the emergency. Is that correct?
Right. So at this point, we're simply stating, based on the rapid increase in cases, we're declaring a state of emergency. From that position, we will then proceed with discussing any other changes we wish to put in place to protect the life, health, and safety of our residents.
But in any event, Mayor, the direct answer to Councilmember Litterer's question is that yes, any order that is entered pursuant to the declaration has a term that is concurrent with the declaration itself.
Right.
And then secondarily, as to any type of extension, I just want to be really clear at some point when we can, is that in this right now, or will we discuss extensions in the sense that I think that to do it monthly or at least once monthly per meeting, if there needs to be extension, otherwise it expires. Is that correct?
That is right. And there's a number of different ways you can do it. Today's suggestion by staff and my office is to extend it to the January 24th as a date certain. And then on January 24th, you can determine whether you want to extend it simply to the next city council meeting for another 30 days. That's entirely up to a majority of the city council.
Excellent. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. I'll proceed with the declaration of the emergency. In the city of Highland Park, December 29th, 2021, I, Mayor Nancy Rodring, do hereby issue this declaration of emergency for the city of Highland Park this 29th day of December 2021. The city continues to adapt and respond to the public health disaster caused by COVID-19, a novel, severe, acute respiratory illness that spreads rapidly through respiratory transmissions. On January 27th, 2020, the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services declared a public health emergency for the entire United States of America concerning COVID-19. On March 9th, 2020, Governor Pritzker issued a disaster proclamation concerning the spread of COVID-19 in Illinois and has since issued renewed and additional disaster proclamations that continue in place. On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared that the spread of COVID-19 is a global pandemic. And on March 13th, 2020, President Trump declared a national emergency concerning the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused extraordinary sickness and loss of life, infecting over 1 million people in all 102 Illinois counties and causing the death of more than 19,000 Illinois residents. The World Health Organization has reported more than 85 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and nearly 1.8 million deaths attributable to COVID-19 globally. The burden placed by the COVID-19 pandemic on City of Highland Park residents, businesses, healthcare providers, and emergency responders remains unprecedented. On March 14th, 2020, I issued an emergency declaration to implement emergency regulations and orders to combat the spread of COVID-19 in the City of Highland Park and to help protect the residents of the city from disease and death. That was the March 2020 declaration. The corporate authorities of the city, that's the City Council, extended the March 2020 declaration from time to time through January 11th, 2021, and I issued several emergency regulations and orders pursuant to my authority under the March 2020 declaration. On January 11, 2021, in the wake of the continued spread of the coronavirus, I issued a new emergency declaration to facilitate the continued implementation of emergency regulations and orders to combat the spread of COVID-19 in the city and to help protect the residents of the city from disease and death. That's the January 2021 declaration. The corporate authorities of the city extended the March 2020 declaration from time to time through May 24, 2021. And pursuant to my authority under the January 2021 declaration, I reissued the emergency regulations and orders originally issued pursuant to my authority under the March 2020 declaration. In May 2021, the pandemic appeared to be slowly receding as the city and state observed a reduction in the quantities of confirmed cases and deaths. At that time, the corporate authorities and I elected not to further extend the January 2021 declaration. However, despite ongoing efforts to contain COVID-19 in recent weeks and months, the emergence of the Delta and Omicron variants of the coronavirus have led to a resurgence of the pandemic, with case counts in Illinois reaching their highest levels. And considering the ongoing health and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic that continue to be felt throughout the city, it's necessary to issue this declaration to further combat the spread of COVID-19 in the city, to continue to protect the residents of the city from disease and death, and to provide assistance to city businesses and residents in recovering from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's the statement of authority. The declaration is issued pursuant to the authority granted to me by Section 92.105 of the Highland Park Code of 1968 as amended, Section 11-1-6 of the Illinois Municipal Code, 65 ILCS 5/11-1-6, and Section 11 of the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act 20 ILCS 3305/11. I hereby declare that a state of emergency exists in the city of Highland Park for the reasons set forth in this declaration. Pursuant to the authority vested in me, pursuant to section 92(110) of the city code, I reserve the right to issue emergency orders in furtherance of this declaration. Provided, however, I have determined that I will not issue any additional emergency order unless a draft of such order is first presented to the corporate authorities of the city for their consideration at a regular, special, or emergency meeting of the city council. Further, no such additional emergency order will take effect unless it's first been approved by a majority vote of the corporate authorities at a regular, special, or emergency meeting of the city council. Notice of any additional emergency order that has been approved and issued will be provided to the city clerk, posted on the city website, and otherwise provided to the general public as quickly as practicable. This declaration will take effect immediately and will expire automatically upon the first to occur of 1, the adjournment of the next regular or special meeting of the corporate authorities of the city, and 11:59 on the date that is 7 days after the date of this declaration. Provided, however, the corporate authorities in their discretion may extend the duration of this declaration by a majority vote at any regular, special, or emergency meeting of the corporate authorities. And then I have signed and sealed, and this has been signed and sealed with the official seal of the city of Highland Park on the 29th day of December, 2021. And so with that, I am asking for a motion to extend the date of the expiration of the mayoral emergency declaration through the city council meeting that we'll be holding on January 24th, 2022. And I think that's it at this point.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions on that motion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember Stolberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone.
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman.
Aye.
Councilmember Littlewer.
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 7 ayes and no nays. So that action has been taken. And now we will move on with our scheduled business also to consider the supplemental order concerning on-premises food and drink establishments made pursuant to that declaration of emergency in the city of Highland Park. And so to that end, I know that the draft order, Steve and Gita, has been posted to the city website. I know the council members have received it. I think it's important to note that this supplemental order has been drafted with parallel provisions to those which have already been approved and put into place by the County of Cook. We should talk about a couple of specific terms, and we will then turn to comments from the council and comments from the public. But to begin with, I think the question is a mandate as drafted in the order something that people are interested in terms of folks who will be dining indoors at restaurants? This will not impact employees. This will not impact carryout. This will not impact people coming in to use the bathroom. And there are several other exemptions in the order. Happy to open up that macro question to the council for comment.
Mayor, can I just make one clarification? As drafted, the ordinance or the order does not specify indoors, as you indicated. It's all on-premises food and drink establishments.
And I thought we had talked about specifically exempting the outdoor dining.
And you certainly can do so. That would be your decision.
I had read that was in the order as drafted. It talked about how many sides were open.
Right, the tent.
Yeah, I think it did say indoors too.
It's indoors, and if the tent has.
I stand corrected.
Okay.
It says indoors.
It is indoors.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is that there is interest in discussing this macroly as a concept. I see Councilman Bloomberg has his hand up.
I'm interested in proceeding with this and find myself generally in favor of it. Among other things, it addresses the unique circumstance of being in a confined area in which the use of that area requires the removal of a mask. The use of masks indoors has been demonstrated to my satisfaction, to be effective, but in a restaurant or any food consumption or beverage consumption area, obviously you have to remove your mask. I think the limitation with respect to outdoor dining that is similarly restricted with a certain number of closed sides makes sense and bears a rational relationship to what we are trying to do. I would also like to express that I think it should be extended to a couple of other similar circumstances that are not necessarily included. For instance, our supermarkets often have samples available, the opportunity to taste food or beverage or consume food or beverage within grocery stores in our community. Similarly with country clubs, auto dealerships often as a courtesy provide areas, waiting areas with beverages. I think if they wish to continue to do that, it would be appropriate to include that under those circumstances. But of course, they could exempt themselves by suspending those services during that period of time. But I would vote in favor of it if it is only limited to restaurants, but I think those other activities, which also require the removal of a mask to consume food or beverage in an enclosed area, should be considered to be made part of this, depending on what the rest of the council feels about that.
Appreciate your comments, Councilmember. Councilmember Stone?
Thank you. I agree with what Councilmember Bloomberg said. And I thought that some of those sort of additional uses in other spaces were actually included. It did specifically refer, for example, to grocery stores, not to samples, but to more of a cafe kind of setting. So yeah, I don't know if there's additional language that needs to be added or not. And I know I see Steve's hand is up, but I wanted to just add to what Councilmember Bloomberg said, that I believe that in addition to have the public health benefit of having this in place, I think this will also help our local restaurants because I think there are a lot of people in this town who are going to be much more likely to go out to restaurants if they know that the people dining near them are vaccinated and have shown that proof of vaccine. I think it makes people a lot more comfortable. I think that science has shown that the vaccine makes it less likely that COVID will spread as well. So I'm in favor of continuing on this path.
Councilmember Holloman has her hand up. Steve, do you want to answer the supplemental locations that provide indoor dining?
The definition of the entity that is covered by this order, that would be covered by this order, is broad. It means any location in the city at which food or drink is served indoors for on-premises consumption. And then it goes on to give a list, which is it's including without limitation is the list of examples. So Councilmember Bloomberg, I believe that your hypothetical examples would be included.
I appreciate that. The reason for my comment was a notation at the earlier part of the supplemental order that suggested it was limited to restaurants, but I do see what you're referring to. So as it stands, I'm pretty comfortable with this as it is.
Okay, so that would be under definitions, sub 1, which is the definitions of on-premises food and drink establishment.
Yes.
B1, correct.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question on that point that Steve just made? So does that doesn't mean that everybody entering, say, a grocery store that has a cafe would need to show proof of vaccine? That would just apply to the people going into the cafe portion and taking off their masks. Is that correct?
If the area were separated, I think the answer to your question would be yes. But if cafe type foods were served throughout the grocery store, the answer would be no. It would be as soon as you come in the grocery store.
Okay.
Or similarly, a car dealership where there's a little cafe where
you would hold on, Councilmember Littleworth, please hold on to your comment until I call on you. Councilmember Holloman had her hand up first. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that we're not restricting access to grocery stores. I support this because it is an elective experience to go out to dinner. and we want to make that as safe as possible. But it is not elective to get your groceries. And so I think we have to be very careful that we're not somehow accidentally restricting and requiring our grocery stores to check vaccination cards. I don't think that's tenable. And I don't think we should be, restricting access to that degree. So I think we need to be careful here.
We all agree that we
Okay.
have no interest in having any kind of mandate related to the access to groceries. And I do think to that end, it needs to be a very carefully and narrowly defined cafe section of a grocery store, period, and not all grocery stores that may possibly have people grabbing a sample of cheese on the way through the aisles. Steve?
Indeed, our definition does say cafes within grocery stores.
Right. Okay. So let's be very clear. Thank you. Councilmember Holloman, I think you had another statement you wanted to make, or no?
Yeah, I also just wanted to clarify that we're going to support this mandate with some education, training, and information provided so that we're very clear to our restaurants what we're requiring and that we are helping them with this. This is a burden on our restaurants in terms of who has to enforce this. We're asking them to take an extra step. So I would hope that we could follow the city of Chicago in providing educational materials, webinars, seminars, information to support this mandate, because I feel that, while it is in the public health interest, we are asking these restaurants to bear the brunt of enforcement. And I think we need to do whatever we can to support that.
Mayor, I can address that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So subject to council approval, we will provide information to the general public right after this meeting on the regulations that the city council approves. We will follow up with very specific information to all the businesses, and we are planning virtual meetings with them as well. And then we will also coordinate one-on-one meetings with them if they want to talk very specific about their business. We're also providing, very similar to Chicago and Cook County, sample signage that's specific to Highland Park, so they can post those on their doors, so they can provide information to their employees. So we will provide a full education campaign for them.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Littlewer, you had jumped in, and then I see Councilmember Stolberg and Stone have comments, and Councilmember Tapia as well. So Councilmember Littlewer, thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry for jumping in, but I thought in accordance with Council Member Stone's comments, I just wanted to clarify that other areas where there was an indoor cafe, it would not restrict the entire business. And I think, especially with the number of car dealerships we have, I thought that was a really good example. So I just wanted to clarify, but you all have done that. So thank you. That was not my main point. Philosophically, I think we have an obligation to do as much as we possibly can to protect our citizens, our businesses, and whatnot. But I do also think that that has to be balanced with their ability to do business and to be welcoming to Highland Park, on the other hand, in a safe environment. So I'm very much in favor of this, but I do have to say, one of the things that is now making me more comfortable with it is the fact that while we will put this emergency order in place, it is very circumscribed in the sense that we do need to extend it each time. And I'm hoping that's going to be almost on a monthly basis, or else it expires and we will go back to not having that type of thing in place. So that's number one. Number two, I do have a clarification question, which is not my other main point. And that was, Mayor Rotering, you mentioned that this wouldn't affect employees. And it seems to me that if this is put in place, there will be a responsibility on the restaurants to ensure that their employees are vaccinated. I just want to be clear as to what we are saying, and then I'll make my other point. So if you or City Manager Newkridge, or if Steve Elrod could respond to the employee situation, meaning in restaurants, I just want to be sure we're all on the same page on that. And then I'd like to just finish my last comment.
Sounds good. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So under the supplemental order under A5, that's where it specifically references employees. So all employees of all on-premise food and drink establishments must either provide proof to the establishment that they are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 with an approved vaccine, or provide proof to the establishment not less than once every 7 calendar days of a negative COVID test.
So in theory, that means that were this to go into effect January 7th, it's possible that an employee would have to show a negative test in order to continue working until he or she is vaccinated. But it is doable, is my only question. Okay, because I feel very strong.
Let me be really clear. There is no vaccine mandate of employees of our businesses.
Okay.
We are simply asking that they show proof of a negative test.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're,
Sure
you know,
we'll
making it as
understand.
easy as possible. Okay, the only other thing that I had to say was really had to do with enforcement, and that is that I know that there is an adjudicatory process if in fact things are violated and it's more administrative. I think it puts a tremendous burden on the city in terms of enforcement, because Lake County is not doing what Cook County is doing, where Cook County is going to enforce this. I think it puts, and so because of that, I just want to make sure that people are considering the fact that were this to be optional, those businesses that opted into it would get our signage. People would know that these are places that have done this. But in fact, it would be less onerous for some of them. And it just worries me in terms of the actual enforcement and the way practically it's going to play out. So I just wanted some reassurance, and perhaps that goes back to the original mask mandate, to determine how that will be taken care of from us as a governmental body.
Mayor, I can address that. So thank you for the question, Council Member Littlewer, and especially since we have a number of residents and businesses on this call. We'll include this in our public communication as well, subject to council approval. So how we would handle the enforcement aspect is, one, we want to make sure that all of the affected businesses know what procedures that have to be in place and what they need to do for their employees as well as for the public. So it's really a big emphasis on education, really, for public health purposes. So we're going to work very diligently to make sure that people understand the regulations and what they need to do and by when. From there, if there are any violations, if someone witnesses a violation, we do encourage them to contact the city manager's office here at City Hall. And we will have someone, it'll primarily be our business development staff, that will do a follow-up to that business to make sure that all their employees are aware. Have they educated their employees? Does the business owner and the business manager understand what needs to be done? So that's with a telephone call to start. And subsequent violation would result in a community development inspector going to that business, and they would be witnessing what exactly is happening. Are they following the rules? If they're not following the rules, making sure that they understand. After that, we provide a written notice of violation, and then a subsequent infraction after that would result in a citation. And that citation is a citation that would be an administrative hearing. The fine for that is not less than $25, not more than $750 for each offense. Our goal here is really education. We don't want to penalize people. We really, though, need people to make sure that they are adhering to these regulations. And so that is the fashion that we would do that.
Thank you very much.
And I want to repeat that. Our goal here is education. Our goal here is also to have this be as short as possible. We're trying to mitigate a rapid rise in cases. In the last 14 days, according to the Lake County Public Health Data Hub, cases have gone up 74% in Highland Park, 101% in Deerfield. We're just trying to mitigate this rise and then get back to business and life as usual. Thanks for your patience, Council Members Stolberg and Stone. Stolberg, if you could go first.
Thanks, Mayor. A lot of things that I was going to say have already been said, and I just want to reiterate two things. One, the last thing that the mayor said, and that Councilmember Littlewer brought up. We, even before Councilmember Littlewer was on the council, this was something that is not intended to be indefinite. It is, as the mayor just said, to try and put a stop to the rapid increase in cases. As we had done throughout this pandemic, we've reviewed the orders, the declarations, the procedures, the actions we're taking at every council meeting. So I'm glad to see that we have a date certain that is to expire. The other question, and I had received a lot of emails from either people for this or against it, and I just want to clarify something that City Manager Newkirk said. If, there are people who are opposed to this, there are people who are in favor of this, and a lot of questions I got was surrounding enforcement. What if I am at a restaurant and I notice that they're not checking cards, or that the restaurant is not following the rules? And the question I got, and I think I saw Chief Jogman on here, the question I was receiving a lot of emails about was, how is that reported? Is that a police matter? Is that a city manager's office matter? So Gita, I think from what I heard from you that it is not, call the Highland Park Police, that it is handled administratively through the city manager's office and community development, business development offices, et cetera. So I think that that's very important, that if we're going to ask our businesses and our residents to do this, that as part of our education, they have a clear understanding of where to report any concerns and what actions the city will be taking.
Mayor, before Manager Newkirk responds, can I ask your indulgence to make a point of order?
Sure.
I see a number of members of the public using the chat feature of Zoom. I ask, and if there's any way we can disable it, I would ask that we do so. I'd ask all members of the public not to use the chat. We run into issues with the Illinois Open Meetings Act if we do. Mayor, I understand you're going to give all members of the public that want to talk on this subject an opportunity to be heard if they're on this Zoom call. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so if you want to make a point, you will be given an opportunity. Please do not use the chat function.
Great. Thank you very much for noting that. Councilmember Stone.
Thanks. I had 4 specific questions. So the first one is, given the emergency nature of this and the quick rise in cases, should we be making this effective on January 3rd rather than January 7th? And also that would be in line, I believe, with Cook County and Chicago. And do you want me to read all 4 questions, or do you want to go one by one?
I'll be honest. I think to be appropriate, we should maybe have a motion and a second, and then have comments and conversation regarding that motion and that second. But if you want to also pursue just sort of a term sheet approach, it's up to the council, whatever people are interested in. At the moment, we do not have a motion. I'm happy to pursue the term sheet approach, and we can, and if anybody wants to jump in, they may jump in. Go ahead. So your first question is January 3rd versus January 7th.
Right. That's my first question. Do you want me to give you all 4 questions, or you want to get answers? And
Here are all 4 questions, and then we'll run through the 4 questions. Thank you.
So the second question is in section 7 of the draft. It says that businesses must develop a written plan for how they will enforce.
That's sub A.
Yeah, and I'm concerned that would be burdensome on businesses, and don't know that is necessary. So I wanted to talk about that. On page 3, there is a definition of fully vaccinated, which I believe is in line with the CDC definition, which doesn't necessarily include boosters. And I just wondered whether we should say anything about, once eligible, that the booster is part of the way you become fully vaccinated. And also on that page, there's an exception for performing artists. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit further.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilmember Tapia. Oh, I'm sorry. If you could hold for City Manager Newkirk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in terms of the effective date, Councilmember Stone, I completely understand the interest in aligning with our Cook County colleagues, just in the consideration of the timing today, and given the fact that the 3rd is Monday, that is an awfully quick turnaround time to have businesses put in place all these regulations. And then we as staff need to develop, all the communications and protocols and education. So respectfully, I would ask that it be no earlier than January 7th. We have January 7th written currently in the order. Also appreciate the point in terms of not wanting to make this burdensome for businesses. I know everyone appreciates that, and certainly that is a goal and interest of the city council. That I think is an important factor as a staff, because we have talked internally about, okay, we're going to go into a business owner and say, you know, what is your plan? You know, we'd like to see it. But I think, so it makes sense that the council may not want to impose that, but just so we're all on the same page, a business is going to have a plan, especially if they, you know, they have turnover of employees as they hire new employees, temporary individuals. We do recommend, and we will work with them to put together a plan in place of making sure that all their employees know exactly what to do. And then specifically, because we're dealing with this as an organization, for those employees who are not vaccinated, having procedures and a policy in place for getting those employees tested on a weekly basis is absolutely imperative, and what to do with those test results and where to, you know, share them accordingly. So I would just ask that you keep in consideration as you discuss the policy questions.
Before you go on to the other two questions regarding the plan, is that something that you said the city was going to be developing some resources, including signage? Will the city perhaps write kind of a sample plan that's in maybe Word format or some sort of format that can be adapted for each business and provide that to the businesses in some way?
If I could just jump in, I feel that we're kind of getting into private business operations, and that's beyond our purview. I recognize, and I think it's important to state, we're stating that there is concern about the public's health. I think the manner in which a business goes about ensuring that they are following the rules as we've laid them out should be sufficient, and they should have that ability. We're not going in and inspecting. We're not the Lake County Health Department. We aren't going to be checking to make sure that each business is following the set rules and protocols, just as we don't do that regarding the temperature of the dishwasher water. You know, I feel like we're getting a little bit over our skis on that piece. And I appreciate that we're providing resources, but I don't know that we need to have that be a requirement within the order. That's just my point of view. Councilmember Bloomberg?
I echo that. I agree with you. And I think with respect to what our city manager has talked about, the educational efforts of the city to work with businesses, which is consistent with, I think, what we've done in the past and done very well, that process of educating business owners on what needs to be done should be adequate for them to have some sort of plan in place. But I agree. I don't think that should be a requirement that we need to force business owners to put into writing and demonstrate in a concrete fashion to the city. I'm satisfied that through the educational process and working with the city, what we would like to happen, which is compliance, will happen through the educational process.
Thanks.
If I can also, while I have the floor just a moment.
Actually, sorry, Councilmember Tapia had his hand up.
Okay.
So if you have a separate non-follow-up piece, I'm going to ask that you let him precede you. Thank you. But first, let me ask Councilmember Stone, are you done with your comments and statements?
Well, I agree with you and Councilmember Bloomberg that we should just delete that section regarding the business's written plan. But I had two other questions that weren't yet answered, which was the definition of fully vaccinated and whether performing artists should have an exception.
Okay, so let's start with the top. Let's talk about effective date, January 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th, or later. I think at this point, our two options are the 3rd or the 7th. I'm happy to, have other comments made. But in terms of those questions, if we could do a straw poll of, January 7th, raise your hand if you're supporting that effective date. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't see Councilmember Holloman. 6. Sorry. Okay, thank you. January 3rd. Okay, so that would be 6 in support of it being effective January 7th, and apparently an abstention. In terms of the language concerning protocols, does anybody support this written protocol requirement as stated currently in the order? Raise your hand if you do. I see no hands raised for that one. The other question was concerning performers, and what was the fourth one?
Boosters.
Vaccination.
Okay, so
Fully vaccinated includes boosters once eligible.
Yeah. Thank you. And so Corporation Council, did we go with CDC guidelines out of consistency with Cook County, or what was the, yes, okay.
Yes. However, it's those orders are now a week old, and the science and the process is evolving regularly. So this is truly a business decision on your part. But that, yeah, when I drafted it, I used Cook counties
Sounds
and
good.
then CDCs.
Okay, so I guess the question is support of using CDC guidelines or support of a booster. I guess the question is the booster is first, given that that was what your preference was, Councilmember Stone? So
And there are, Mayor, if I may, there are also complications with using the booster as fully vaccinated, because some people aren't eligible to receive the booster, because under at least current CDC guidelines, there's a wait period after you receive the second, or if it's a J&J, the dosage. So it will require some drafting if you want to go this way.
and the booster is only available to folks 16 and above at this point. It hasn't been approved for people under the age of 16.
That is correct also.
So the language would have to be something regarding, the 2 doses plus the booster if eligible. And is that too complicated to enforce?
So it sounds like it will also eliminate significant members of our population, given that they're not eligible to have the booster. If for health reasons, or if they're under the age of 16.
Well, it would only apply if you would be eligible. If you're not eligible for the booster, then you're
asking people for their age. I think it's getting a little bit more involved.
Yep. That I withdraw that question then.
Okay, so we'll just say CDC guidelines in support.
CDC guidelines. Yep.
Okay. And then performers who choose not to be vaccinated.
I have a problem with that if the performer is unmasked and singing. I think that's a concern, because that has been shown to be an activity that spreads a lot of virus.
Mayor, just if I may, to give you the history, that this is not a unique to Highland Park provision. There was a provision like this in the county order that I picked up. There was also a provision that dealt with visiting professional athletes that are playing in arenas within the county. I excluded that because there aren't any currently in Highland Park. I suppose, well, in any event, you can debate these. These are policy questions that Councilmember Stone raised that you're welcome to. There's no magic for including this other than the fact that it was in the counties.
My brother is a performing artist, and he is fully vaccinated, but he's testing all the time. Every time he's going to a concert to perform, before he takes off his mask, he's always tested. Most of the venues where he performs require that, but I believe that is something that it should be either vaccine or testing, or something in order to make sure that the people taking their masks off and eating are in fact safe, if that's the intent here.
I almost would counter again that this is perhaps a business decision, and it's for the business owners to assess the risk, and also to, the folks who are choosing to go to hear the entertainer or see the performer ask that question. Again, we are looking at a temporary rise in cases. This is, if you want to go see somebody play the guitar and sing somewhere and you're concerned about the risk, then perhaps that's the question you need to ask and allow the business to make that decision. I think, again, we're getting a little broad in our reach here. That's just my opinion. Councilmember Bloomberg, Councilmember Tapia, you've patiently waited as we've waited through these 4 questions. Bloomberg, do you have a follow-up to this specific issue?
Yes, and just to that, I would support either including performers specifically within the proof of vaccination guideline, or alternatively treating them as employees. Since we are requiring employees to either have proof of vaccination or get tested every 5 days, I think that's a reasonable extension to include performers within that range. They are, although independently contracted, they are also to that extent under the control of the restaurant owner as any employee is. So I would be in favor of one or the other of those.
Thank you. Councilmember Tapia, do you have follow up to that issue? And then we'll get to your, no,
I just want to get to my
your questions. Okay. Are we done with Councilmember Stone's 4 questions? It sounds like Councilmember Lidwar.
Just very quickly, I think I really have to support what Mayor Rotering said, in the sense that we need to be broad-based. This is about ordinances. I don't want to get into the weeds in this. We're talking about the public good, and I think this is heavy enough in terms of a burden on our restaurateurs and everyone else. So I just really want to keep it as broad as possible, with a start and then an extension date. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Tapia, thank you so much for your patience. Please share your questions.
Well, it's going to be sharing a point of view here, which is going to be counter to the direction that I've been hearing from my respected council members. As a way of background, I'm a firm believer in COVID vaccinations and boosters. I believe in the need for masks and social distancing. And I believe that we must care for the welfare of our city in a holistic way, healthcare, socially, inclusively, and economically. And obviously we have a dilemma with no clear-cut answers, and that's what we're trying to navigate our way with the best of intentions. I understand the impetus behind the vaccine mandate for restaurants, but I'm not convinced this will achieve the intended results, while at the same time it may bring more harm than good to the other ways in which our city needs to thrive as well. On the virus spread itself, it is clear that vaccines and boosters are not enough to stop the spread. Clearly, they go a long way in reducing the chance of death and even a very serious illness, but the science is there that 79% of cases of Omicron is with people who have been vaccinated already. So if we impose the vax requirement, how much mitigation will it actually account for is a question that I wonder about. On the economic front, how much will this hurt our businesses, particularly the majority that are small businesses with small staffs already burdened by staff shortages and razor-thin margins due to the prolonged impact of the pandemic? Is it realistic to ask them to, on top of taking orders, fulfilling the orders, delivering the orders, taking payment, to also ask for proof of vaccination, maybe proof of an ID, plus then be responsible for some form of enforcement when there's no proof? And the requirement that they come up with the protocols of how they will manage this does not seem fair. And I think Councilmember Stone has brought that up. So I think that might be addressed as we go along. And then as long as our neighboring communities are not doing this, we're also putting our businesses at a major disadvantage in a way that would hurt us in the long term, because once a restaurant closes, it's closed and we don't get them back easily. And we know the pain of that. A couple other points I'd like to make. I have been worried about the potential inequity issues since communities of color have been lagging behind in vaccinations. So there's a potential inequity there. However, the latest statistics do show that their gaps have narrowed and are close to equitable. Yet the problem is overall that there's still too many people that are unvaccinated. But I don't believe that a vaccination requirement to eat at a restaurant is the way to get them there. I think that we need to do other things, and maybe we haven't done enough, to educate the benefits of social health and individual health of getting a vaccination and all the things that go with that. I also worry about the emotional health to our community and that polarization that a vax mandate could cause. That could be a detriment to our community, as we have witnessed through all the exchange of concerns around this. And I worry about the burden on our city staff regarding the enforcement. As City Manager Newkirk has explained, she talked about the process and they're already understaffed. They already got a lot to do, and to put this on top of them, I worry about that not being a sustainable thing to do. So ultimately, for those worried about the risks, they do have a choice to have food delivered or to do carry out, but restaurants don't have a choice if this mandate is imposed on them. And in the way that, what if it does affect the number of customers that go to their businesses, or in managing the additional burdens on their staff time when they're already overburdened and having to cut their hours short already because they don't have enough staff. So rather than having the city impose the vax requirement on all, I would instead favor allowing restaurants to decide for themselves if they would require vaccination proof. That way they can choose or not to be that place with lower infection risk for their patrons as a differentiator rather than having the city decide for them. So those are my concerns. I know they run counter to other comments that I made, but I wanted to put those on the table for discussion.
I appreciate it. Thanks also for your patience as we talked about other issues, and appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into putting these concerns and comments together. I do have a couple of responses. I do want to point out to you, you recognize neighboring communities literally across Lake Cook Road from us, our neighboring communities who are all going to be putting this exact mandate in place in Glencoe, Cook County portion of Deerfield, Northbrook, and so on down through Cook County. I am going to disagree with you that there hasn't been enough done to educate folks about the need and impact of vaccine. I would counter that there's probably been tens of millions of dollars of educational resources put behind this, and recognize that there's always more opportunity. But I think there has been a lot of communication about the positive impact and necessity for vaccine in the face of this global pandemic. Lastly, in terms of the staff burden, I share your concern. I think we always are trying to figure out how to move forward in a way that protects our businesses and our residents and our visitors, but also doesn't add more to the plate of Gita Newkirk and her incredible team. That being said, we did recognize at the beginning of this meeting that this is a temporary response to what we have considered to be an emergency to the public's health. So I know that our staff is up to the task, and our goal, frankly, is for this to end and for us to get on with business as usual and not have to have this additional burden. But I do appreciate the time that you've put together, and appreciate your proposed concept of it being optional for restaurants. If I'm boiling it down, I think that's where you have landed. Yes.
And Mayor, if I could just add, it kind of fits the philosophy that when you were going down the path of, well, we should get into the weeds about how restaurants run their business and let them decide what's best for their patrons or not, I would extend that logic to this point.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Bloomberg.
Mayor, I want to respond to an observation that you made earlier, and if I can at least move this forward, I'd like to bring a motion recommending and to pass the proposed supplemental order with the alterations in response to the three proposals that there was a consensus about that Councilmember Stone brought. One is with respect to the date of commencement, that this would commence on January 7th as proposed. I am going to include, although I don't think there was there wasn't a majority consensus on it, so I'm not going to include within my motion that this applies to performers. I don't think we had a consensus on that, even though I would support that.
Okay.
There was another, a third element, and I can't recall what that was, but I think it was the limitation of application to cafes, but that's already in there.
No, it was the creation of written protocols.
Yes.
Oh, yes. So I would
A7.
support this without including the written protocols to have to be submitted by businesses. So to clarify, the motion would include a date of commencement of January 7th and would exclude a burden on businesses to include a written protocol for how they plan to work with the city.
And also exclude the performer. Well,
I don't think it's in there, so I'm not going to add it
It's
in.
written as an exemption, so it's
Right.
it's not a change.
Correct.
Corporation Counsel?
I just want to just clarify the nature of the motion. It would be to support the mayor's issuing an order along the lines of what was read by Council Member Bloomberg.
Right. I wasn't quite sure how to phrase that technically, but that's what I'm after.
Right, that's the belt
So that is the
of
motion.
Highland Park, and that is while the mayor can do this unilaterally, I have asked that the council weigh in on these decisions. So I appreciate
So it'd be a motion in support of.
it. Thank
Correct.
you. Councilmember Littleworth?
I just wanted to clarify, is there a need to specifically state in the motion that this would run concurrent in terms of the expiration with the emergency order in place? And that's a question really for Steve. In other words, we have a start date, thanks to Councilmember Blumberg, but the question is, do we also have the fact that it automatically expires on January 24th unless we as a council renew it?
It's not necessary to add that. It is clear in the emergency declaration that any orders issued pursuant to it, which this would be, run concurrent with the emergency declaration.
That's fine. Thank you,
The order
guys.
has no independent authority.
Right.
So if that's the case, then I will second it, the motion.
City Manager and then Councilmember Tapia.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, was there an interest in defining fully vaccinated, which is under B2 as defined by CDC?
No, I withdrew that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there was not, because it was too complicated.
Just to make sure. Okay.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, hold on a second. If you reread it, there is a specific definition as 2 weeks after a second dose of a 2-dose series, 2 weeks after a single dose series. I think is this how Cook County has it, or do they have
Yes.
it related to the CDC?
No, this is straight from Cook County.
So then that puts the burden on us of keeping track of what is construed as fully vaccinated pursuant to the CDC. Would it make more sense to go through what the federal government has deemed to be fully vaccinated? And maybe I missed why we're not doing that.
That would make more sense to me.
I don't know why we're deciding what is construed as fully vaccinated versus the federal government's definition.
I think it would be broader if we just put it as, per the CDC. And I would suggest to Councilmember Blumberg that I would be happy to remove the second and add it if we would just modify the motion to include CDC as the definition.
I would be happy to agree to that amendment if there is a consensus among the council members.
Yes.
I think it's broader.
It basically includes what has been provided here and then more. So I think I would support that as well.
Okay, then the motion would be amended to include the CDC definition of fully vaccinated.
It's pretty straightforward to redraft it as defined by the CDC. Councilmember Tapia?
Yeah, procedurally, I'm not sure where this fits in because I know we're in the middle of a motion and a seconding. I do have another amendment recommendation. Clearly, the way the winds are blowing, this is going to end up being approved. So, notwithstanding my position, within what is being drafted, can we look at exempting certain size of restaurants or even cafes from this? Because, it's a big difference between a fully staffed restaurant with a host or hostess who can actually take in the ID and the vaccination proof versus a 1 or 2 person coffee shop that has small tables where people can sit and the burden of them having to do all these protocols. Can we draw a line and make a distinction between those kinds of establishments versus the more fully fledged restaurants?
I wouldn't support that. My feeling is if you're in a small space and you're taking off your mask, you're very much dealing with the very situation that we're trying to mitigate. I can tell you that I've recently been in states where this mandate is in place and it's basically a non-event. Hi, how are you? What can I get you? Can I see your card? Here's your coffee. I mean, it's just not as onerous as people are making it out to be. So again, I'm just one voice of 7, but I don't see that gets us to what we're trying to achieve. And in fact, would kind of go counter to what we're trying to achieve. Councilmember Blumberg?
I would agree with that. I would also, my position also is that I think that we have to apply this equally to all affected establishments so that they compete on an even playing field.
I agree.
Agree.
Councilmember Littwer?
I agree with Council Member Bloomberg's statement. Complete.
Thanks. Councilmember?
Agree.
Thanks. Okay. All right. So we're still in the middle of this motion being amended and seconded. Do you want to try one more time, Councilmember Bloomberg, to get us back to where we are, and then we can move
Sure.
forward with our decision making and listening to the public's comments?
Yes, the motion as amended would include a commencement date as proposed of January 7th. It would not require businesses to provide a written concrete plan of compliance. It would not apply to performers. And it would apply to all affected businesses. And it would include a definition of fully vaccinated that is consistent with the CDC guideline. Did I miss anything?
Nope. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. So are there further comments, questions, or concerns from the council before we take comments from the public? Okay. I'll state at the outset, I appreciate all the emails that we've received. I would like to say that until 11 o'clock this morning, we all were able to read them. If you sent them after 11, I'm not quite sure that the full council had a chance to review them, but we appreciate the thought, concern, and emotion behind this issue. And want people to know that we do understand that there's a broad range from support to opposition. So thank you. I am going to ask that members of the public who wish to be heard follow the following guidelines, and that is keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. We will not be reading emails unless those emails were specifically asked to be read into the record. And to that end, I'm going to ask that reading of the email also terminate at 2 minutes. And the full email obviously is introduced into the record, but for purposes of getting this meeting to its conclusion, we'll keep all public comments to 2 minutes per person. I ask that you not raise your hand twice. We'll hear from you once. Thank you. And if you want to say ditto to what other people are saying, that works too. You don't need to reiterate what's already been said several times. Corporation Counsel, how are we with that instruction? Okay, super. Thank you. So City Manager Newkirk, my first question is anybody at City Hall for public comment?
Mayor, City Hall is open for the public if they wish to join us virtually here, but there are no members from the public here for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to start with the 2 minute read of emails, or do you want to actually, you know what, let's, out of deference to those who have signed on today, let's give them the opportunity first to speak. I'd like them to state if they are Highland Park residents or not. And we will commence with those who've had their hands up. Thank you.
Okay, great. So why don't we start Joel Kahn?
Thank you, Mr. Kahn, for joining us today. The city manager will commence the timer when you start to speak.
I prepared a statement which I sent to the city hall, the city manager.
Yep.
The attachments, and I would request that she or the clerk put my statement in attachments in the record.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor and members of the city council. I am Joel Kahn. I live at 26 Lakeview Terrace, Highland Park, and I oppose the vaccine mandate because the vaccine mandate is harmful because it will injure those who get the vaccine and it will not stop transmission by the vaccinated. The vaccines are not vaccines as we traditionally understand the use of the term, but experimental gene therapy. The vaccine is an experimental drug that has never been formally authorized, that is properly tested by the FDA, but its use has been approved only because the government has declared an emergency and put into place an emergency use authorization, and the drug makers are held harmless for any adverse outcome. The injections of the vaccine into the bodies of our citizens will inject into them SM-102, a cancer-causing chemical, graphene oxide, which will cause prion disease, neurological damage, such as Parkinson's disease and dementia. The injection of mRNA will change the DNA of the vaccinated to produce without stop the spike protein, which is linked to myocarditis and do other damage to the internal organs of the body. The following quote is from Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, MD, who has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in addressing the coronavirus pandemic, contained in an article published by the American Frontline Doctors. Dr. Zelenko states, according to the CDC, healthy kids 18 or younger have a 99.998% rate of recovering from COVID-19 without any treatment. There is no medical necessity for any vaccine, especially an experimental and unproven mRNA injection that is shown to have many dangerous side effects. Based on Dr. Zelenko's statement, there is no reason why the vaccine should be required for children 18 or younger. The mandate to take the experimental vaccine violates the 14th Amendment in the State of Illinois Bill of Rights, because a so-called vaccine will shorten the life of those that take it, and the taking the lives and liberty of our citizens without due process is unconstitutional. Vaccine mandates are arbitrary and capricious because they do not stop transmission and they injure the vaccinated. They are also unlawful.
That's been 2 minutes, please. If you could wrap up in the next sentence or two.
Okay. Because vaccinated citizens can transmit the disease as well as the unvaccinated citizens, there is no rationale to coerce the free choice of our citizens. If it doesn't make sense, we usually don't do it. And therein lies one of the greatest protections we have to ensure that the solution isn't worse than the problem. The supposed trump card of those who favor coercion is externalities. One person's behavior can put another at risk, but that's only half the story. The other half.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thank you very much. Your statement is included in the record, and we appreciate the time and thought that went into pulling all of that information together. Many thanks for joining us today. Gita, who's our next speaker?
Mark Hill.
Welcome, Mark Hill. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
First of all, happy holidays to Mayor, Council, and thank you very much for doing this. I just wanted to say, I won't even comment on what I just heard. Mr. Elrod said one of the most cogent things when he said the fluidity of the information. It is like building the plane while we're flying it, and I'm sure you understand that. And the information is changing not only every week, but every day. The question that Council Member Stone said was a really important one, and that is what we define as fully vaccinated. And that definition is very different from the NIH, CDC, etc. But what is considered by scientists as fully vaccinated is now what we're calling triple vaccinated, meaning getting the booster. Why? Because we have learned very recently that the immune competence after the second dose, which used to be thought to be a certain amount of time, is actually less. And so therefore, what will happen in the future without any question is we will call it triple vaccination. And I think it's a point that has to be brought up, because I've seen personally in my own practice in patients in the hospital that talking about the completely unvaccinated patients, of course, they're the one on ventilators, but the ones that are doubly vaccinated, and I prefer to use that term, they're not on ventilators, but they're sick. And the point is that I think what Mr. Elrod said, which is so important, that we have to be fluid and recognize that the information that we have is going to change. And we just might have to define in a more detailed fashion what fully vaccinated means. And I just wanted to comment on that. And thank you for what you're doing, because the bottom line of all is safety. And I've never in 40 years of practice seen anything like this at all. And so thank you for doing that. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Hill. Appreciate you joining us today. Gita, who's our next speaker?
Dr. Hill, I just wanted to say that was 1 second shy of 2 minutes. So thank you very much. The next speaker is Jody. Jody is listed.
Jody, you're welcome to share your comments for the next 2 minutes. Please go ahead. You'll need to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we'll move on to our next person and Jody can resolve her technical challenges.
Okay. Just the first name.
And I'm sorry, one more item is if people could please state whether they are Highland Park residents or not. Thank you.
So first name, Steve.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for joining us today.
I am not a Highland Park resident, but I'm a Highland Park business owner. This one to me is extremely difficult because as a business owner, as a restaurant owner in Highland Park, you're really, not you personally, but this is really putting the business owner in a really difficult position because we're basically becoming bouncers, enforcers, policemen. And I don't know how I would ever be expected to do that when it's a really unfortunate position that you're putting us in, that we're being put in, because it's very difficult. And I believe that this is going to put restaurants in jeopardy of being put out of business, because I think people are going to make choices to go elsewhere. And you're going to get a lot of self-policing where you're going to get a lot of people just calling to tattle and tell. And it's going to be hard. And you can tell probably by my voice, I'm very emotional right now because I'm really worried about what's going to happen to my business. And I can't ask my guys to police because it's going to put them in an uncomfortable position. We're already extremely short-staffed as it is. And I don't know how. It's not about education. It's about how we're going to do this, because it's unfortunate. And I just wish that you guys would all understand, why can't you let people make their own decision? If they don't want to come, they don't have to come. If they want to come, they can come. But it's really up to them to be the responsible ones to say, I'm willing to come and have a seat in your restaurant, or I'm not. And to put the business owner in the situation to police that, it's never going to work. And that's it. That's all I have to say. So I don't know. Hopefully you guys will have some comments on that, but that's really what I wanted to get across.
Thank you, Steve. And I think through this conversation, you've heard that there is across the board concern and support for our businesses. And as you know, we did provide support throughout the last few years in terms of grants, in terms of assistance with outdoor dining. And we greatly appreciate your business. You're a critical part of our local economy. That being said, I do have to tell you, I recently was in states where this is a requirement, and it seriously is, how many people what kind of a table do you need? I understand your business is across the counter and then you go grab a table. Presumably the person taking the order can literally just say, can I see your vaccine card? Great. Here's your food. So we recognize and appreciate the challenge, and hopefully this will be short-lived in its duration, and we will be back to business without this requirement in the near term. But appreciate you and appreciate your business and appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Am I still on though? Can you hear me for one more quick question?
Sure.
If one of my guys or myself asks the customer for their vaccination card and they say, I don't have one, am I supposed to say, well, then you're booted? I mean, is that how this is supposed to work?
I think please make sure to get your food to go. I mean, they can still obviously take their food and enjoy it at home.
And then if they cause the situation, am I supposed to call the police? Am I supposed to call you? What am I supposed to do with that?
I know that people have also already had to deal with this in terms of the mask mandate, which is in place statewide. And so whatever form you're using of enforcing that, I would use in terms of this as well. And again, let's hope that this is over in a short period of time. I appreciate your frustration and appreciate your understanding of the position we're in. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Just for the record, Steve, can you just confirm this is Steve Geffen, right?
Yes. Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
Perfect. Thank you. Just because we have the first name only. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ina, who's our next speaker?
Okay, next speaker is Will Hendrick.
Will, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. First, you guys do a great job. I think you guys are great city councilmen. We have a great city manager. So thank you. I guess what I would want to say is I'm sort of indifferent on the mandate in general. I do think that procedurally, I think it makes more sense for it to be done at a state level than a local level.
I agree.
And, you know, I think some of the concerns about putting the businesses at a disadvantage and some of the consistency things that have been brought up are addressed when it's done at the state level, not done at the local level. I understand that we don't control state politics, so I understand where you're coming from. It would be my hope that we could get something done at the state level instead of being kind of alone on the local level, because I do think it could have a negative impact on our economy and our business here. I have 2 small children, and I guess what I would ask of you as city council is be careful in how we draft the mandate and make sure it's very specific. We talked about it a little bit in here about how you define what vaccinated is. I have a child who's 6 years old. He's just getting the opportunity to get his second shot this week. So I would put a caveat in there for children, maybe that says, 1 dose for a child, because I'm pretty on top of things and I'm just now getting him to his second dose. And you don't want to get to a situation where I can't go to a restaurant in Highland Park now simply because my child has had 1 dose. I'm trying to follow the rules, and, I would just be mindful of that. And then, I think someone had brought up maybe pairing it with the CDC's guidance. I mean, that kind of makes sense in terms of it evolving, but I would just say, if we could make sure we're just being careful in how we define things in the order, that would be great.
Thanks, Will. We appreciate your comments. Absolutely understand where you're coming from. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Ida, who's our next speaker?
Our next speaker is Dino Demetrio, resident and business owner.
Welcome, Dino. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your feedback earlier this week when I reached out to you. I appreciated you taking the time to communicate with me literally in the middle of the holidays.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for the opportunity to speak. I wear a couple hats or a few hats. So in this conversation, I want to start off as a co-president of the Property Owners Association, and there was a unanimous vote to ask for the City Council to have this happen at state level or follow whatever state level mitigation is being used as, and that's the last I'll say as a property owner. As a family that owns a business, it's been difficult even before the pandemic to have, there's been labor shortages, specifically in the restaurant industry. The pandemic created even a bigger issue of what was existing ahead of time. And we feel that this will also create even a bigger issue and possibly lose employees. Currently, it is very hard to get testing, and I expect it to get even harder. We can't keep up with the pace. And so I don't know how many are vaccinated or not vaccinated at every restaurant, the employees. I just know that testing has become harder and harder to come by, and the lines are longer. And I know many restaurant employees work multiple jobs, and the window for testing is smaller. The other point I was going to make is if it was voluntary, our restaurant was voluntarily non-smoking before it became law, because we felt that it was the right thing to do and something that the community wanted or needed. I am concerned about enforcement. Last year, we had a outdoor tent policy that it seemed like the law was to have 2 sides open a certain percent, and never saw that followed by anyone else other than us, or a lot of the other establishments not following it. And so I am a little concerned, and I think we'd have a hard time with multiple entrances at our location that you can come by in and out of the restaurant. You can come in through the front door or the back door, and I think it becomes a little difficult for enforcement on there. So And that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dino. And I appreciate your comments. And just to let you know, last week we were in touch with the governor's office. We were also in touch with the Lake County Board Chair and Lake County Public Health Executive Director. Here's what the governor said. And for whatever reason, he chose not to have this be statewide, although we all would support that. I think it would be more appropriate. But he said, I want to call on local leaders to do the right thing for their communities, just like Mayor Lightfoot did, just like President Preckwinkle did. They looked at their communities and they said, this is the right thing in my local area. I hope that people across the state will take the example and look at what will work in their community. So, would it be better as a statewide mandate? You bet. Would it be better as a Lake County mandate? Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, they have chosen to go a different path. And as I mentioned, I was in touch with the Lake County Board Chair, who basically said that because Lake County is not a home rule county, they cannot make this mandate. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but regardless, here we are. So I am in touch with several other mayors in our in Lake County, and they are looking at this as well in this week. But suffice it to say, as I said earlier, all you have to do is go across Lake Cook Road, and there you are in an entire group of suburbs who are moving forward with this pursuant to their county's public health guidelines. So we also hear and appreciate the challenges, Dino. I know that the labor shortage has been major and has been impactful. Again, my experience has been that this is pretty much a non-event. What would you like to order for lunch? Can I see your vaccine card? We'll be back in a moment with your lunch. So thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you for your leadership on the POA. We appreciate it.
The next person is Marcia. If you could just state your full name and whether or not you're a resident or business, please.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. My name is Marcia Moran. I'm in Highland Park. I did send you guys all an email. I'm sure you guys already read it.
We did.
But I'm so passionate about this. I've never spoken up in anything. I've been in 13 years here in Highland Park. And I do want to reiterate my points of what I sent to you guys, because I do want others to hear this. Unfortunately, I feel like you guys have already all made your decision. So it's falling on deaf ears, which is unfortunate. But for me, I feel I have to do this for me and my daughter specifically. So here it goes. I'm sharing my concern on the proposal for a supplemental order to require proof of vax for all on-premises food and drink locations in Highland Park. Because you have the right to implement such an order does not mean it is the right thing to do. I have a teenage daughter that cannot get the vaccine. She has a history of seizures and adverse effects to medications. This will exclude her from socializing with her friends, which are the low risk group. We know this by looking at data, and will cause mental distress. These kids have been through so much the last couple of years. Mental health is a major issue amongst our youth. You will only fuel the problem with this order. Instituting such an order provides a false sense of security. We have clearly seen over the recent weeks that the vaccinated are not immune to catching COVID. There have been numerous news stories about vaxxed-only parties, vaxxed-only cruise ships, vaxxed-only units of military, etc., all breaking out with COVID. I personally know many that are vaxxed with both the double dose and booster who have gotten COVID in the last 3 weeks alone. This is not a solution to address the current situation. You will drive people away from patronizing the businesses and create further division amongst our community. And just a couple of points I do want to call out quickly. For Highland Park, we have the highest vaccination rates across all of Illinois. One dose, we're at 92.39%. This is according to IDHP as of yesterday. Fully vaxxed is at 81.17%. So if we are so highly vaxxed and vaccinated people are going in, then they should feel safe and secure and not worry about the smaller number, which are probably more of the younger group of children and teenagers, of catching something from them. And I have highly patronized all Highland Park through the last 2 years. I've spent a ton of money at the restaurants trying to help keep them in business and do my part as a community member. If this goes through, I will not patronize any of them. And it's a shame because they're the ones that are going to be taking the brunt of this. based off of principle. But I have to do what I have to do for my daughter. And I also want to state, I'm not anti-vax. My children have gotten all their vaccinations. But it is too soon, in my opinion, and the news is coming through every single day on the effects.
Moran, you could please wrap up, please. It's been over 2 minutes. Thank you.
No problem. So obviously you can hear the passion in my voice. And I know we all have different points of view on this, but I do implore you to reconsider this and fully think this through on all implications and ramifications across the board. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for sharing your input, Marcia. And as a parent also of a medically fragile child, I understand the frustration and the desire to smooth the field and to make it as easy as possible. I do know that there is an exemption for people who've received a medical exemption, and I recognize that's your personal choice, your daughter's personal choice. Presumably, she would be exempt from this requirement, but I leave that conversation to the two of you, and recognize and understand. We're trying to mitigate this rapid rise in cases. This is a temporary effort. And we recognize that, we're not eradicating the entire situation, the entire pandemic with this effort. We're just trying to reduce the burden on our local hospitals, our healthcare system. We are already hearing that they are seeing an incredible rise in COVID cases in their beds. They're again short-staffed like everybody is. It's really trying to strike the right balance. But I understand where you're coming from and appreciate your sharing your story with us today, and all of our best to you and your daughter. Thank you. Ida, who's our next speaker?
The next is a representative of Tamales. If you could please state your full name, and we know you're a business. We love your business. If you can also state if you're a resident too, please.
Oh, there we go. Jeff Corbina, not a resident. Been around Highland Park. I have been a resident in the past, not right now a resident. My family's been associated with retail in Highland Park pretty much ever since I can almost remember, since I was around 10 years old. Dad was a Highland Park retailer. I now own a business in Highland Park for 15, 16 years. Starting with what you guys said in the very beginning, you guys, when I say you guys, I'm looking at a screen of 6 people. What was stated in the beginning was this was all about education. If this is about education, forcing us to ask for vaccine cards is not educating anybody. That's forcing us to do something. That's not educating us. If you want to educate us, maybe you could give us a pamphlet to hand out to our customers when they arrive, or we can, give us a box, of pamphlets to put outside our door for people, if that was about education, like you all claimed. That's just one point I'd like to make. Next thing I'd like to say, if vax cards, does that mean everybody at the table has to show us a vax card? And if they do, does that mean they've got to show us an ID with it to make sure that it's an actual vaccine card for that person? We all have been in society long enough, and people lie, cheat, and steal all the time. So what's the real functionality of the way this is kind of being addressed? And you guys were concerned about asking an age during this. Well, if they have to show us an ID to have a burrito, then they're telling us their age most likely, which and that's forgetting all about some of the HIPAA and some of the other laws that are enacted to have people allow to allow people to have some privacy and freedom. Freedom. I don't know what we're free to do anymore. I don't know what's right and what's wrong. It's difficult to tell in today's society. But I guess there's been a couple of comments today about, if you go a little bit south and you cross Lake Hook Road, you go a little bit south and cross Lake Hook Road. What happens when you go north or you go west? Those are our competition too, not just south of Lake Hook Road. In addition to all of that, I just kind of wanted to make a comment about the accessibility. I appreciate that you're trying to give us an alternative to this goofy situation of trying to make us, force people to show us something that's private to them. I happen to be vaccinated. That was my choice. I talked to my primary care physician. I did those things. Most of my staff is completely vaccinated, and they were willing to give me their cards. I at one point probably went above and beyond and was posting those cards so that the customers were, but that was a choice of me, my staff, and their choices. You know, and people said, Jeff, you got to be careful because people are stealing vaccine card numbers, and so there's all kinds of fraud going on about this. You know, but I was really trying to comment on the accessibility to the weekly testing. You know, and personally, I haven't had to deal with that. You know, but if these employees, like Dino had just mentioned, work 2 jobs, you know, some of them are hardworking individuals that are working 60, 70. Some of them are working 80 plus hours a week. So where are they going to find time to spend at a 4-hour line, you know, and then wait 3 days to get the response? Just doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your comments. I'm presuming that you asked for ID when you serve alcohol, but I'll leave that conversation to another day. Gita?
Absolutely, when I ask for, but I don't do that when you order a burrito.
I understand. Thank
and
you.
I do that to people that look like they're minors, you know, not the older.
Let's not have that conversation because I think you're supposed to ask everybody that you're serving alcohol to. But like I said, we'll have that conversation another day. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
The next person is Renee Kahn. If you could please also share with us if you're a resident.
Hi, Renee. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi. Yes, I've been a resident since 1954. So I think I win some kind of contest. I just want to say that I was raised to support your local community. I am in Tamales all the time. I live in the country kitchen tent and certainly Once Upon a Bagel. So the people that spoke here, I support all their businesses. The problem is that I'm 74 years old and diabetic. So the only place that I've been able to eat is in that country kitchen tent because I can't safely put myself in jeopardy by eating inside a restaurant where people who are unvaccinated might be. So I carry out to support, but I cannot eat in those establishments. I'm hopeful that as this short-term mandate is put into effect, that more people like me will in fact be going into these restaurants and actually supporting those businesses. So that's my hope. In terms of the gentleman that spoke about the vaccines being dangerous, I would just want to say that 800,000 people would say that he's wrong. So that's all I want to say. I love my community. I want to support my community, and I want to eat in all these local restaurants and give them my business. That's all.
Thanks, Renee. Appreciate you joining us today. Thank you. Ina, who's our next speaker?
Mayor, I don't see any other virtual hands raised. We'll just give one more invitation to anyone who's joined us virtually. And now David Katz.
Thank you for joining us, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm a former resident of Highland Park, but a frequent shopper and diner there, and appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to say ditto to Mr. Khan, Marcia, and the tamale guy. Mr. Khan in his presentation talked about Dr. Zelenko, and I encourage everybody here to research Dr. Zelenko. He will win the Nobel Prize, I believe, and came up with not only a preventative, but a cure way back in March of 2020. So don't listen to me, just do your own research. It's not, all the science is not there unless you listen to all the scientists. I'd also encourage you to listen to Dr. McCullough, who just recently was interviewed by Joe Rogan. They got millions of listeners. It was the most popular Rogan podcast. So please research that a little bit if you can. As Marcia said, the vaccine's not working, guys. There were 70 cruises that everybody was mandatory to be vaccinated. They got inundated with COVID. The vaccines aren't working. They're experimental gene therapies that are not working, and quite honestly might be the cause of the spread of Delta and Omicron. You can go to the VAERS website, guys. This is not lunacy. It's the vaccine adverse event website. 20,000 deaths are reported after the vaccine. VAERS only gets 1 to 10% of the data because it's very hard to submit the data to VAERS. So that means 200,000 to 2 million deaths because of the vaccine. Guys, the vaccine's not working. You're scapegoating unvaccinated. And with all due respect to the mayor, let me see your papers is the slippery slope to scapegoating. It's not your cure to scapegoat the unvaccinated. Vaccine's not working. Please do more research. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, Gita, anybody else?
No, Mayor, there are no other hands raised.
David, please mute yourself. Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, we have received, as noted earlier, we received a number of emails from residents and non-residents on this subject, certainly as well as from businesses. We provide direction to the public that if they're interested in any comments being made on the public record, they can email us at cityhp@cityhpil.com. We ask that all words be limited to 200 words, all emails be limited to 200 words or less, and then those would be read under the public record. So I will read those in a moment. I also just want to share for public information, we do invite the public, if they wish to email in excess of 200 words, they can certainly do that, but we'll read 200 words as part of the formal record, but individuals can email us at any time. So unless you have an objection, I'll go start reading these emails. Is that okay?
Good, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the first one is from Michael Sandow. He writes, I grew up here in Highland Park, class of 2013, lived here since 2006, and work in the area doing heating and air conditioning. If these measures are passed, not only will this hurt businesses even more, they will drive business elsewhere to other communities such as Deerfield or Lake Forest. In a time where people are already struggling, imposing more measures on, quote, public safety will only be proven to be further disastrous. Just look at the gas tax of Illinois and how everyone goes across the border to Wisconsin to fill their tanks up to 50 cents cheaper. COVID isn't going away. We need to learn to live with it, just like the common flu. People here in America have the freedoms to choose vaccinated or unvaccinated. Whether they want to share their medical information or not is up to them. And what's right for some people is not right for others. Imposing this would only be hindering our freedoms and terrorizing businesses, of which whom have struggled the past 2 years during these tough times. It is up to the officials of Highland Park to make the clear and conscious correct decisions on letting the residents make safe and sound judgments for themselves. The further we go down the road of restriction sets dangerous precedents. I hope for my fellow Americans and residents of Highland Park that this does not pass. The next email is from Carl Lembrecht. He writes, Highland Park City Council, as I know this meeting was given less than 1 day notice, from my memory, a public body needs to give 4 days notice after asking.
Hang on. I know we're reading that into the record. That is absolutely not true. Go ahead. We followed the law in terms of notice and due process. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. This was posted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. He writes, after asking many times, I have not learned of any COVID-19 deaths in Highland Park, yet I do know of one death because of the vaccine. As I read, and if you give free food, you are except for this regulation. This is a very anti-business ordinance. Page 32 of the Democratic Party 2020 platform is to kill Americans by cruel, painful death of dismemberment, abortion. The word, quote, choice is not what a normal person would choose. I do not believe any of you support dismemberment abortion, yet Highland Park has no ordinance stopping dismemberment abortion. It is time to consider this for a future meeting. The next letter we received is from Greg Latek. He writes, the British Medical Journal has screened more than 10 million people and has proven that asymptomatic cases of COVID-19 are not infectious. Breakthrough cases are becoming more common than ever before, which has proven that you can still contract COVID-19 regardless of vaccination or booster status. If you really wanted to protect citizens, you would require a temperature check at the door. As of today, according to the CDC, children ages 1 to 4 have a 0.000233 mortality rate. Ages 5 to 14 have a 0.134 mortality rate. Why succumb to children being segregated amongst each other and not able to hang out with other children at a restaurant due to their vaccination status when they are not even at risk? We still do not even know the long-term effects the vaccine may have on our children and may not know the safety and efficacy until the documents are released in 55 years from Pfizer. Hoeing, who is also a member of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which helps guide the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's decisions on vaccines, said there appear to be prominent symptoms of Omicron, cough, fatigue, and tiredness, congestion, and runny nose. The next email is from Johanna and Nadho Bursak, residents of Highland Park. We are opposed to the order that would require proof of vaccination for certain businesses. The decision has no basis in science. The only thing this order will do is further divide residents of Highland Park and Highland Park from other communities not moving forward with this senseless action. There's no evidence that restaurants are causing the spread of coronavirus. Highland Park is one of the most vaccinated zip codes in Lake County, with 92.39% having had their first dose, and Lake County above 80%. Are you saying that a small group of unvaccinated individuals, the majority of whom have already been naturally infected by the virus, are driving the case and test positivity rates? No, Omicron is ripping through the community regardless of status. So if this order has no impact on the spread, why would we be considering this? It appears that this order is simply an action to show irrational loyalty to a political perspective while furthering unnecessarily dividing our community. We implore you to refrain from implementing this unethical and discriminatory order.
Are these emails all people who have requested that they be read into the record?
They have we're following our procedure for reading these into the record. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
The next is from Stephanie, Highland Park, no last name given. Please reconsider the vaccine mandate that is up for discussion at today's special council meeting. This is not going to help prevent the spread of COVID and will only hurt the businesses that are left in HP. It should not be the business's burden nor responsibility to check vaccine cards. If you really wanted to reduce the spread, you should have temperature checks done at the door instead. Vaccinated people are still getting sick, and because of mandates like this, think being vaccinated means they are immune and can't spread it. This mandate makes no sense whatsoever and is simply another thing you are asking for businesses to comply with. The next email is from Michelle Hilgoth. She writes, I'm going to say it, supporting medical tyranny and segregation reveals which side you've been on in 1930s Germany. This tyranny has to stop. The vaccine doesn't work. It was promised to stop the spread. It doesn't do that. Instead, it creates super spreaders because many unvaccinated individuals don't know they're sick until far after they've spread the virus. I have natural immunity and therefore no scientific justification for an injection that won't provide informed consent when the FDA is released in 74 years. Do not impose any vaccine requirements. Stop this insanity. Just a couple of others. This next one is from Emmy Cohen. She writes, I would like to voice my opposition to Highland Park imposing vaccine requirements for certain businesses. Specifically, I'm concerned with the applicability to children ages 5 and up. Children have no control over whether they are vaccinated or not and would be excluded from facilities and activities under this requirement. Children have been forced to give up so much over the course of the pandemic, and this requirement just further punishes them. I fear they're being used as pawns, and it is wrong. As is abundantly clear and recognized by the citizens of Highland Park, vaccinated people are getting and spreading Omicron. It does not follow that this requirement would make businesses measurably safer. My opinion is that the harm of this mitigation to children, let alone our businesses, outweighs any perceived benefit. I am only one person, but I cannot support this requirement, especially the applicability to children. Finally, if to be implemented, January 7th does not allow time for full vaccination, 5 weeks should be allowed. Suzanne Wall writes, with many of your constituents out of town, I'm shocked that you are calling a meeting with less than 24 hours notice and a citywide vaccine mandate. This is not public service. There is no need to further decimate our business community and create more empty storefronts given just the below. COVID, 99.75 full recovery rate per CDC. Vaccines do not prevent COVID. See case tracker below from the CDC, clearly showing vaccinated individuals get and spread COVID. You state in your Facebook post that this meeting is called in a quote effort to combat the rise of COVID-19 cases in the Chicago metropolitan area. Questions on that statement and the impact to our community. She asks us to please reply by 9 a.m. tomorrow prior to your meeting, and also read these at the meeting. If vaccinated people get COVID, please explain to me and all your constituents how exactly this will, quote, combat the rise. By how much will it combat the rise? Please provide me a percentage with accurate expected decline of both illness and mortality rates. Since you are, quote, public servants, for how long have you weighed the input of HP residents and how much input did you receive? Please provide this data to me, both percent and amount. How are the business owners giving their input to this, and how many are for and against? How do they see the impact on their businesses? For businesses to, quote, check proof of vaccination, will the city be subsidizing the additional staff needed? How much will that cost taxpayers? Please also give me this cost breakdown. How will this play into our efforts to attract new business to our empty storefronts? And how do potential new businesses feel about this? How much input have you gained? Have you gained this input? For those of us with religious or medical exemptions, how will that be handled? Is there a central place to submit those exemptions? Who will be staffing that? William Doms, I won't read his email because it was the exact same email that I just read into the record, but he writes the exact same thing. And then the final, I'm sorry, there's three more, I believe.
Councilmember Stone has a question.
Yeah, really quickly, Gita, two of the emails that you've read so far have called into question the notice for the meeting. And I know this was clarified once already, but I just want to clarify it once more since it's come up again. So Steve, can you just tell us, how far in advance do meetings need to be noticed? And did we do that?
The Illinois Open Meetings Act requires a 48-hour notice for any special meeting of the city council, and we complied with it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And it was posted as required.
Yes.
It was.
Thank you.
Yes.
Possible people didn't see the notice, but we had the notice up there.
Yep.
Thank you. And thank you for that break just to get a drink of my coffee. So the next email.
Manager Newkirk, Mayor, while there was a break, to the extent that some of these emails request information for which we have a public record, we will treat those as a Freedom of Information Act request. And I'm just letting the council know, and we'll respond accordingly within the required time periods.
I think it's also important to note that to the people who wrote and said, please keep this private, we cannot keep your correspondence private. If you write to us, we are a government and subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So all emails pertinent to this subject matter are available to those who wish to file an application for Freedom of Information Act.
Yes. The next email is just from the initials JD. I want this read at the city meeting. I just found out you're considering a new policy to require proof of vaccination in the city of Highland Park, and you have this on the 12/29/2021 special meeting agenda. I find this appalling, and yet another policy to drive people out of the city and this state. It will also hurt many businesses, jobs, cause people to starve, go hungry, and hurt people. Please immediately stop this terrible and unlawful policy for proof of vaccine. It seems you clearly have no regard for our rights, laws, medical conditions, or sincerely held religious beliefs, right of conscience, or people's concerns with this experimental shot. This is discrimination, violates federal laws and state laws, bodily integrity, personal autonomy, right of privacy, HIPAA, FD&C Act, Civil Rights Act, ADA, Freedom of Religion, Illinois Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, right to due process, coercion, oath to do no harm, international human rights laws, etc. It seems the city doesn't understand and follow the laws and people's rights. We have already had federal judges rule against Biden, OSHA, military, the city, and etc. You cannot require an EUA vaccine, which a federal judge said Pfizer biotech is still EUA and not interchangeable, which isn't even available. It seems you're overstepping your authority again. When are you going to stop the mask mandate as well? After nearly 2 years of this is ridiculous. Other states stopped the masks a long time ago. Mayor and council, I'll stop at this point only because this email continues and we only said that we would read 200 words or less. The next email is from Bridget Venturi. She writes, Highland Park already struggles to attract dining, entertainment, and shopping patrons in the best of times. Look at all the vacant storefronts in the central business district as proof. If you want to further the economic suffering and morale of your small business operators, then establish a vaccine mandate and watch people flock to neighboring towns to spend their money. Highwood already steals much of Highland Park's entertainment dollars. Next email is from Ryan Gamperl. He writes, I'm writing to express my opinion that it is not a good idea to enforce the local businesses to require proof of vaccinations inside the establishments in the city. I think it is difficult enough to talk and encourage people to wear masks. We haven't had our dining room open because of the many issues over the course of the last year and a half, but having to police people to wear a mask has never been a topic that helps getting our dining room open any faster. To enforce something like this at this point of the pandemic is going to shift things from a cultural perspective in the downtown area. I believe that it has been detrimental in the downtown area that my restaurant has not been open inside. And while I am trying to change that as quickly as possible, this is going to add even more pressure to opening the doors to our customers. If I am short-staffed as it is and having difficulty getting enough employees to be able to take orders, run food, wipe down tables, etc., and now I'll have to pay someone to stand at the door and ask for proof of vaccination, I'm already struggling with the pricing of inflation. I've had to pass that along to the customer, and the prices are not done rising. I've spent over $10,000 this year on gloves alone and more on masks, extra cleaning supplies to keep the building sanitized. It's adding up. There's nothing hospitable about this, and it is crushing the hospitality industry. If a mandate goes into place, it better have clear guidelines as to what is required to lift the mandate, and when it expires, it better be written with intent to be lifted as soon as possible. We opened doors to businesses with a 7-day rolling average percentage higher than it is right now, and we are testing more than ever before.
A couple of statements have been made that I think need to be answered. There have been, unfortunately, several deaths in Highland Park due to COVID. The mask mandate is a statewide mandate. I think that's where I am at the moment. But I just, there are a couple of things that are being said that are simply not true. I understand. Nobody likes this. Nobody likes these mandates. Nobody wants to move forward with mask mandates and all of this. However, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're wrapping up the second year of a pandemic. Millions have died throughout the world, and millions more have been sick. And we're doing what we can to try to balance the interests of what's best for our community. So I just want to clarify that. Is there more?
Just one more. This is the last one. This is from Elizabeth Kutlarczyk. She writes, request that the email be read into the record. She writes, vaccine passports are framed as a way to, quote, protect others. However, because the vaccines neither prevents infection or transmission and only serves to protect the recipient by, quote, reducing severe symptoms, there's absolutely no reason to request or mandate that a person receives the vaccine to, quote, protect others. I cannot remember a time in history that the failure of a product has been so passionately blamed on the people who do not or cannot use it. If the vaccine worked to protect the recipient, why then would anyone else need to take it for it to be effective? If it doesn't work, then why force others to take it? Vaccine passports do not address and recognize naturally acquired immunity or those who are unable to receive the vaccine for medical or religious reasons. This proposal should be reviewed and immediately terminated, or at a minimum, allow a negative test to be accepted in lieu of proof of vaccination, as well as exemptions be allowed for religious and medical reasons, as all school districts in Illinois currently allow. Beyond the obvious, there are many other reasons why the issue of medical registration should be a concern to anyone. Vaccine passports are discriminatory and exclude diversity. We know that having to show an ID to vote is racist based on the fact that IDs are not easily obtained by all. Vaccine passports with ID requirement would be equally exclusionary. She goes on. We do have receipt of her email, but I will stop reading at this point per our procedures. And that concludes all the written comments. Mayor, we do have two people who have their hands up. So if you're comfortable, we can
Before we move on to them, I know we also have information from North Shore University Health. I think that you were planning to share in terms of the increased burden. I think I spoke summarily about this, but just, if you wanted to share, this is for a couple of reasons. A, to mitigate suffering within our community, but B, to relieve this rapidly increasing pressure on our healthcare system. So just wanted to share that as well.
Yes, thank you. And for the public that has joined us for this meeting, if you're not signed up for the city's e-news, we strongly encourage you to do so. You can sign up under the Stay Connected tab on the city's website. Really, since the onset of the pandemic, we have been providing information that is shared with us from the CDC, Illinois Department of Public Health, as well as our colleagues at Lake County Health. And on a regular basis, we are providing the positivity rates and other statistics and pertinent healthcare information from these health agencies. So we are not coming up with that information. We are merely sharing it from the health agencies. So that's very critical to share with the public. We are in regular communication with our partners at Highland Park Hospital, which is North Shore University Health System. I communicated with the vice president yesterday, who did share with us that due to the increased number of cases, they have modified their procedures. They are no longer allowing visitors in the hospital at this time due to the increased number of COVID cases. They shared with us that 37% of the ICU beds at North Shore are occupied by COVID patients. There's also a significant number of medical beds occupied by COVID patients that do not require ICU care. They are seeing an increase in positivity rates among their employees as well, which has created staffing challenges as they're working to ensure that patient care is not impacted. Additional personal protection has been implemented for the safety of patients and staff, including masking inpatients whenever possible. And similar to their practice throughout the last 2 years, Glenbrook Hospital will become an all COVID hospital as the number increase and the situation warrants. And can't stress enough, again, they are encouraging everyone to get vaccinated and boosted, as this will decrease the severity of the virus and keep people out of the hospital.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that these emails that Gita just read are not the only ones that we received. We received many, many emails. And they were on both sides of the issue, but the only ones that were read into the record were the ones that were sent to one particular email address. There were many other people who contacted us through different email addresses, official email addresses, but not the city HPIL email address, the consul at city HPIL, which is just a minor variance. But I just wanted to make sure that people are aware that we did receive many, many additional messages on both sides of this issue.
Right, absolutely. And those are all part of the public record.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Gita, you said 2 more people have their hands up, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yes, Keith Bryn, if you could just share with us if you're a resident or not as well, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Keith Bryn. I am a resident of Highland Park. I know many of you, and I really do applaud your efforts to try to get some government activity to try to get this under control. The issue really that I have is that, to echo some of the sentiments of Councilman Tapia, that I don't believe this is well crafted enough to solve this particular problem, and instead is going to cause some unintended consequences to local businesses, which are already significantly struggling. The vaccination does not appear to be protective against this particular virus, and so mandating it will change absolutely nothing, but will put the undue burden on the restaurants. There was a Columbia University article, the findings that were just published on the 23rd of this month in the journal Nature, which indicates that Omicron dodges all of the vaccines and boosters that we have. So putting in place mandatory vaccines is not actually a solution that's going to change anything. The second thing to take a look at is that I took a look at the actual writing and the draft of the order. And some of it doesn't make sense to me. Like, for example, in section D, the indoor venue exemptions sort of don't make sense to me. Schools where kids clearly eat lunch, charitable food service establishments like soup kitchens, the virus is there too. I'm not sure why we would broadly exempt them There might be a reason, I just don't know it, while putting the mandate on everything, including small coffee shops or anything else. In addition, I've listened to the arguments here that you all have had, and you all appear very selective in how you want to dip in and out to business decisions of local businesses. It's not okay to interfere with hiring a singer who may be unmasked to sing songs, but yet you're interfering with how people are treating their own patrons at restaurants. Instead of just having spacing, you're mandating the patrons have certain levels of vaccines, but not necessarily others. Why not simply just mandate, like you do with the employees, to have patrons show evidence of negative tests, which would seem to me to be a lot more practical to reduce the spread than evidence of a vaccine, which is not geared to protect against the spread. And then finally, if this is really an emergency, why aren't we doing this as of tomorrow? In a week, I understand the governmental side of things, but the onus is of what you're putting on the restaurant. Government doesn't have an action. The individual restaurants are being pushed to take the action. So if we have this tomorrow, we can escape New Year's Eve gatherings and everything else, which inevitably are going to be super spreader potential events. Instead, we go past it, and I'm not sure why, because nothing is changing between now and January 7th. To suggest that we're following City Chicago and Cook County, I'm not sure that's something to really be proud of. Not many of their policies have really been very effective. I certainly applaud all of your efforts to try to make this work, but I just don't think this particular policy is crafted well at all to get to the outcomes that you all are seeking. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
And then last person is Thomas. If you could please state your full name and share with us if you're a resident.
Hi, my name is Thomas Maliki. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I've been resident since 2006. I came to this country back in 1994, so I was born and raised in Poland. And I guess I could say more, like I've seen it all, how it happened during the socialism, communism over there now, where it's go here in the United States. I have one question actually for Mrs. Mayor. Mrs. Mayor, have you ever owned a business?
Have I ever owned a business?
Yeah.
I have not owned a business. No.
Okay, so maybe you should listen to those business owners because I'm also one of them. I've been a customer of Tamales. I've been customer of other restaurants that owners been here today on this call. And they're great people. They're working very hard. They're putting their butts online every single day. Sometimes they have to do the jobs for the employees who do not show to work. They get sick. They have their family situations. Now you guys want to put even more burden on them. Why are we having more empty stores in Highland Park? When I came in 2006 to live in this beautiful town, there was far more restaurants, far more places to go in. Every year, it's less and less. And we have something unbelievable here. We have Ravinia Festival, which comparing, when I talk to my friends in Poland, they can't even imagine that we have some beautiful venue like this, and that will create more situation when we get to the summer. So I would actually go back and rethink what you guys trying to do here, rather give freedom to the business owners to make their own decisions. Because it's really them who will have to pay taxes, them who will have to hire those people, take care of those people who work for them, their families. And this way, I guess we can go all along. But pushing decision like this in a very short time, especially between holidays and New Year's, it's kind of, I would say a hit under the belt. Thank you for your time. I hope you guys recognize all those people before me that have similar ideas. And I think more decision should be on us owners and business owners who pay taxes, who want to support this town, rather than we being put in front of the information that I had a feeling on this whole meeting today that you guys made decision before it even happened. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us today, Thomas. Appreciate it. Thank you for your comments. Okay. At this point, I think it's time to take the vote. We have a motion. We have a second. Unless there's further council conversation or comment, anybody have anything else they'd like to add before we go ahead with the vote? Okay. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Tapia?
Yeah, I stand by my comments earlier and hearing our business owners and many of our residents give their point of view. I only reinforced my point of view, so I will vote no.
Councilmember Stolberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Stone,
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman,
Aye.
Councilmember Littlewer,
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 6 ayes, 1 nay. The motion passes. I will be signing the amended order when I receive it, and it will be going into effect January 7th. And I do want to recognize and thank everybody who's joined us today, everybody who's taken the time to email, to speak, to provide their points of view, and state that I truly appreciate all the efforts of my council colleagues, corporation counsel, city manager, city clerk, and so on. Rob Sabo, I believe, is still with us for another day. Nope, we have somebody else running Facebook Live. But in any case, thank everybody for your time and coming together to do what we feel is absolutely necessary to protect the life, health, and safety of our residents. We appreciate our businesses. We are going to continue to be here to provide resources, and we will be in touch. Thanks, everybody. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the vote on adjourning?
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember Stolberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone. Councilmember Bloomberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman.
Aye.
Councilmember Littlewer.
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 7 ayes, no nays. We stand adjourned. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.